I'm Chris Templeton, and I am very pleased to be here with Melody Hilton, having deep conversations in the Honesty Project and letting me share the model of, the stories we tell and how it can apply to some of the questions that Melody's and issues that Melody and I have chatted about. We ended up doing this as in post a number of conversations just to put some clarity around the model first. So what we've talked about up until this point is the idea that there are three questions. What's the story I'm telling? Is it serving me in this moment? And is there a more authentic story I can tell? And then based on that, on the second question specifically, in this moment, is the story I'm telling serving me? Well, that becomes a binary choice. So when somebody asks that, there's only two answers. It either serves me, which we say is below the line, and we'll talk about a little bit about why, or it doesn't serve me. And so we draw a horizontal line and we say anything that doesn't serve me, any story I'm telling about what's going on with me, with you, and around me, politically, whatever the case may be, anything that I say that doesn't serve me goes above the line. Anything that I say, any story that I tell that does serve me, that I feel centered and grounded about, I don't feel like a victim, I feel like I have agency, that all goes below the line. So what we haven't talked about beyond kind of what triggers us to ask those questions typically is I'm in a situation that I don't like that I'm in. So typically it's around something that's negative in my life, could be something that's ongoing from that I've held on to since I was a kid, could be something that is happening politically right now and I just can't. Oh, I'm so mad. When I am in that place, I'm above the line, but the three questions have never, ever talked about emotion other than the trigger. I'm angry. Okay, wait, maybe I better ask that question, put a little space between stimulus and response and see if that's serving me. And so we've been practicing that a lot, haven't we?
Yeah, actually we have. I ran across something just the other day. We've been talking about this, you and I, back and forth so much that it seems like when it's one of those situations where when you start thinking about something, all of a sudden you see, oh, well, that relates to that. Oh, well, that relates to that. And I happened to see Warren Buffett comment about Warren Buffett the other day. Everybody universally loves Warren Buffett. He's well regarded as one of the most brilliant financial minds in probably the world. And he was talking about when something comes across sort of his desk or his being as he's in these meetings and he has to think about it, what he does is takes this breath, breathes it in, and he's giving himself a moment. And you and I talk about that gap all the time between stimulus and response, partially because my favorite thing to do was to really have a really narrow gap and really have a fast response. That did not always serve me very well, or at least it made me feel good, like I was coming from the place that I wanted to come from.
Right. And and that's the thing that's so interesting. A couple of things is, we know that's not where we want to be when we're above the line. It doesn't feel, it can feel good, but it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel authentic. I may be super positive about something that I'm doing and everything's great and you to feel like, oh, but problems are right around the corner type of thing. And the other thing that I think is so interesting that you bring up Warren Buffett. Talk about, here is one of the wealthiest guys on the planet. And is there any question in your mind that he's not just a sweetheart of a guy, totally genuine, authentic, kind of chuckles a lot. He just seems, every time I see him, he just seems to be in a really nice, authentic place, doesn't he?
And you don't feel that it comes from wealth is not protected behind a bastion of billions. It feels like it comes from him.
It's not what we have a tendency to focus on with wealthy people is exactly is what we do is we put them, our thinking is we place them above the line because we're up there too. Oh, wealthy people. Oh, and they're such jerks and they have so much money and oh, look at their cars and blah, blah, blah. And here we are using what we're perceiving their behavior to be as our reason to hop up above the line and behave in a really bad way, even not even knowing if that's the truth about that person, right? And so that's what Warren Buffett is exactly what you're doing. He takes a breath, centers himself. Even if he's triggered to go above the line, what you're saying is he comes down below the line before he addresses what's going on.
From what I read, I would have to say I definitely thought that. I was like, oh look, here's this same technique,
Right.
or it's not completely your model, of course, but it's that technique of separating the stimulus. In this, a lot of what we talk about is the thing that in some cases the bully or the bad thing, and the response, which is me feeling like a puppet, based on my sometimes knee-jerk reactions. I feel like the situation controlled me versus me really, getting into it.
And what it turns out to be, lo and behold, is it's that little protector up in little me land that's pulling those strings, telling you why you should be so angry and be flailing and mad. And it's all because of that protector who really is trying to protect us, right? We say, oh, that's the ego. The ego's the enemy. Oh, please, we got to get over that. That's a part of you that wants to take care of you, and it just does not know how from up there.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so then the next issue of this model is, well, how do we address emotion? How do we address emotion and how it fits into the model? So if you think about this horizontal line, you have emotion that above the line, it's much more animated, it's much more powerful. We can be super negative or super positive, but above the line, it's not authentic. And so when you think about it, when we come below the line, a lot of the words that we use are centered and grounded. When I'm below the line, my range of emotion is far less. I don't have a need to be angry and a victim. I don't have a need to pretend everything's the best it's ever been. When I come below the line, because I'm more centered and grounded, because I'm more solution oriented, the range of emotion to me just doesn't need to be as great. So it turns out that if you think about it, emotion in this model is like a V with that line right through that horizontal line right through the middle. So that's how you fit in Hitler or somebody who's super, think of these religious cult leaders who are super positive, but also for some reason always end up on the negative side and do crazy stuff that is just disgusting, right? That kind of thing. So what the model, the basic of the model is a horizontal line with two lines that form a V with negative emotion on one side and positive emotion on the other. And so as far as I can tell, I can characterize all human emotion in that model and all human behavior in that model. It doesn't necessarily mean that I understand where they are on a Myers-Briggs or liberal versus conservative, that sort of thing. And that's one of the things I love about this is that the model actually is foundational it's the underpinning of how we work. It's not, I may be more conservative or more liberal, and that those conditions help to dictate whether I am below the line or above the line. based on who I am, or where I am on a Myers-Briggs, my ENFP or an INFJ. Those types of things about who I am personally just dictate what are the types of things that I'm more likely to be below the line, centered and grounded, authentic, or above the line, emotional and victimized and that sort of thing. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think that what I find is that when I am below your line, as you described it, so I'm not in an unauthentic state where I'm focusing on the negative, or conversely, being uber positive, but also sort of maybe not looking at the situation with all of its aspects, just saying, oh yeah, it's good, it's good, it's good, we're good, we're good, we're good, we're good. I'm fine, honey, I'm fine. I'm fine.
I'm fine.
So when to use your line as an example, and I'm down, whether I am on and have anger or frustration, or whether I'm ebullient, below the line, I find that I have a deeper contentment that is more across the board.
It's a great
and that
point.
Contentment gives me a springboard to just do so much more. I can be more productive. I face my challenges more. I get after my task list because I'm not spending time up here negative. That task list is killing me. I just feel better, and I handle my daily challenges, whatever they are, just so much more matter-of-factly.
More ease, less effort, that sort of thing. And that's, and really when well, let's just talk about that. So above the line, I call it your lesser self, but I prefer little me, because for some reason people just immediately go, oh man, I know what that means, right? It's almost like it's innate within us. It's like, oh, are you in little me land? Oh.
Not my best moment, not my best self.
Right. And the other thing that I wanted to just point out is that it's not to say that below the line you're not frustrated or mad, but I think that the difference is, on the negative side of the scale, you may be frustrated, but you also know that there's a solution there. Above the line, you're so focused on the problem, or on the positive side, trying to avoid it, or just be so enlightened. And we don't feel any of that when we're above that line. So when we're below the line, we still have a good range of emotion from positive to negative. It's just more at ease. There's more ease to it. There's more of a sense of, I have agency to solve whatever the situation I'm looking at is, that sort of thing. Does that?
Yep. I definitely hear everything that you're saying, and thinking back to the times when, I've really have felt that, to use your terminology, that sense of agency. In some cases, the challenges that came my way were exciting, because I felt like I had the tools with which to, come up with a solution, solve the problem, be part of the solution, and however you want to say that. There was, moments where the challenges, instead of them becoming these enormous stumbling blocks or a huge mountain that I had to just, drag my weary bones up and over.
Yeah.
I was really in a much better place to just face the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, to quote a famous poet.
Yeah. And think about it. When you are in that place of dragging yourself up the mountain, think about all the things that you say to yourself about having to go up that mountain. Like, we actively contribute in our own head when we're in little me mode above the line to make it worse. Right? I mean, it's like, if you're above the line you may be positiving it up or being really negative, but you are so focused on the problem that it's almost like we rehearse how bad it's going to get and rehearse ourselves into it being worse. And, oh my God, you're not going to believe what happened this week. Right? Versus, somebody who's able to be below the line more often and go, it's kind of a crazy week, but you know what was fascinating? Somehow I kind of was able to keep myself centered, and it didn't end up being quite as bad as I thought it would have been even a month ago or something like that. You can see the difference. So that's authentic me thinking, little me thinking. So that's kind of how that all fits together. And then what happens is at the base of that V is where I put one more little horizontal line just a little bit above the V, and that's what I call our enlightened self. And this is where we're without story. Way below the line, we're also without language. It's those times where you wake up with the answer. Oh my God, I just figured it out. Or I've been driving my car for 10 minutes on the freeway and have no recollection of it at all. And if you could let go of the fright of coming back into the moment and being, oh my God, what 20 minutes, where am I? And realize that just prior to that and for those 20 minutes, it's been this really amazing place, right? If you think about the times that you've kind of lost track of time, they're just, I think of it as, I was relating that area at the very bottom to, in this little light of mine, what do they say? The body is the temple of Christ or something like that. The peace of Christ be with you, those types of things. Anything that's enlightening from the standpoint of, I don't feel any need to be anywhere else than where I am in this moment. I may not even be aware of it. That's kind of what I think of at the base, that, where people say, well, under that is where God lives. Spiritually, people say where, the universe, this little light of mine, whatever it works for you, that's kind of what's below that, that where the V comes together. And so occasionally we go down there, a lot of times without even recognizing it. And our goal is to be more authentic more of the time, right? And that feels so much better in life.
Well, it's what we practice meditation for, which is, as just about everybody in the world says, I think even Einstein talks about meditation, but it's to your point of finding that spot where your consciousness solves, actually, like you said, specifically can solve creative problems that you're working on. I mean, I remember once waking up with a database solution that I and a tech person had worked on for an entire week, knowing that the database had the capability of probably doing what we wanted, but not knowing if we understood the code to create that behavior within the database. And then I woke up one day with it. And when I went to my keyboard, I was texting my dev guy and we both simultaneously said, we've got it. It was the funniest thing. It came to me in my sleep, and I don't know where it came to him, but it came out of wherever that ability of the brain is to function on another level, and the heart.
And when you think about it, think about the difference in that. If you define that place as being enlightened versus the I'm in the moment and I'm not looking forward or back, but I don't feel enlightened at all. That's my, above the line little me definition of enlightenment. My thing is that we are going in and out of that enlightened place on a regular basis and completely discount it, right? and don't know it. And yet you hear all kinds of stories about inventors, about Einstein, about people who, all of a sudden were being just kind of in this quiet place, and this answer presented itself. I see it in TED Talks. Jill Bolte-Taylor, man, oh man, the woman who, my stroke of insight, who had uh, her left brain, which controls all of your, ability to function on the planet, language, your senses, that sort of thing, turned off, and she was expansive. And you watch her tell this story, and you're like, oh my God, she doesn't even realize how low down in this model she is, but she's experiencing it. I've seen it in 3 or 4 different talks on TED where all of a sudden they just are in the zone. We talk about in the zone in sports. That's people who are way down low. They may be communicating, but they are in a whole nother space. And
I agree with you.
and when you realize that that's kind of how that works, and we're in and out of there, then you have the ability to kind of create the conditions for that to happen more often. We start to appreciate things more. And when we appreciate, we come down and lower in the model, that sort of thing. So that's kind of the overview. 3 questions. Second question, is it serving me in this moment? And if it is, I'm below the line. And if it's serving me in a way where I wouldn't even think to ask the question because I'm in this place of super contentment and silence in my mind, that's enlightened me, authentic me, and then above the line, little me. and I think the other thing to just keep in mind is this is not about saying never go to little me land.
No.
Because you're always, but it's like the salespeople, the people who say, well, sales for me is like this. I get really high up and then I have really low lows and really high. And what we want to do is just kind of mellow that out and let you go a little bit longer down below the line where you're centered and you're grounded and you've got space between stimulus and response. And I can recognize what's going on within me, how I'm coloring what's going on inside and around me in a way that either serves me or doesn't. And I think that, you can internalize that.
The other thing that's interesting to me about your inverted pyramid is above the line, there is so much room for little me to just run amok.
You bet.
Below the line, as your inverted pyramid comes to your core of enlightenment, the one spot that we don't get to as much as we'd like to, it is a narrower space, like you said, because the waves of modulation are not nearly as high and as low as they are where little me lives in this big area where you can run back and forth, or she can run back and forth to happy, to sad, to negative, to up, to down, to, I hate you, you hate me, I hate myself, whatever it is that conversation is that's going on.
And here's the other thing, just kind of to wrap this up, is for this model, one of the things that I think is so important to understand is that the basis of meaning in my life has a tendency to come from above the line. Like, I look back on my life and there's things that I've had to really struggle, but somehow I've come through it. And so the tendency is that those tough things are the things we look back on, especially if we can look back on them from below the line and go, oh man, some tough stuff there, but look at where I am now. For me and my wife, we look at how we were raised. Good parents basically wanted to do the right thing, but both of our dads were just like checked out, having affairs left and right. And we were kind of like, didn't quite know where we fit. And now we look at the family that we've raised together with 3 kids that are absolutely amazing and haven't had to deal with dads that were jerks and moms that were trying to make everything just be okay, honey. There's your above the line enabler, right? And And so when you think about it, what happens is meaning comes when I take something that's happened above the line, and as a result of that, have found a way to look at that from below the line that serves me. Doesn't, as we've talked about, it doesn't negate a crappy circumstance, but it does say, in that circumstance, with me now below the line, I'm in a place where I have a deeper understanding of who I am, who I want to be. I'm able to appreciate why people behaved the way they did there, or why I behaved the way that I did there. And just go, you know what? That's okay. It's okay that I can look at it, know that there were horrible things, things that I never want to go through again. But here I am below the line with things in a perspective that serve me. And I realize how much stronger I am, how much more meaning there is in my life. So the last thing to say is just, we don't want to say never go above the line. That's not the issue. We just want it to be less time and a recognition of the value of it from below the line.
The anchor to the actions above the line is the authentic self below the line.
Say that one more time.
The anchor to the actions that are above the line is the authentic activity that happens below the line. So
That's
it's just
exactly right.
pulling it right into a safer harbor, I guess, if we're going to use the anchor analogy.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. It's a great way to put it. And so, all of a sudden, then what we've stopped doing is beating ourselves up, beating those up around us who've caused us pain, and said, my dad, there's a lot of stuff he did that I didn't like, but there's also a lot of stuff that he did that was really cool. And I decided to take the best parts of those. Somehow I decided that screwing around on the side wasn't something that I wanted to be a part of. And look at the payoff, man. And I swear to God, Melody, if I didn't have, 15 years of this under my belt, I would not be nearly in the place that I am in terms of appreciation and those additional moments of meaning where you can look at it and go, oh, wow, that is so cool. Whether it's the time we spend with our friends, time with my wife on a road trip, having the kids home, whatever the case may be, when you're able to get further down below the line, there's just an incredible amount of appreciation and gratitude that starts to open up. And guess what? The next step on that one is right down to the base occasionally, more often, certainly than the people that live up above the line and can't get below it.
I love it.
Pretty cool, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
Well, that is mutual. And you know what? I swear, I hope that people watching these videos that you and I have done, and at some point there's going to be, I think we're at around 15 or 20 of them, that people can go, oh my, I do have a new lens on life, and I do recognize my own ability to change how I color my world. And it's not about rose-colored glasses either, is it? We're not saying that.
No. And the interesting thing I feel, and why I think this is so timely, is that I believe more than ever, I gravitated to it because, as we have said over time and time, I'm a storyteller. Not only am I a storyteller professionally, I'm a storyteller in my head, and I'm really good at telling myself stories and then just marching down the little path of that story that I'm building. And I think more and more that I'm seeing that, especially in the younger generation, where a story gets set in their head, and it's a lot harder for them to have a broader view of the situation and step back, and in some cases have mental difficulties. And I'm not, I know we've talked about this not being a therapy, and certainly I've been on the scale of definitely spending some time in therapy to get some of my stories unhooked in my mind.
Yep.
But this tool helps me from letting them take hold. It stops me before I get a real good heater on and get that story just marching down its little Roman road with its little army behind it. And so I just think that it's very timely for a lot of people.
Thank you. I do too. And I hope that this ends up being something that really impacts people in a way that they say, I realize with this model, I have the ability to change how I perceive the world and to make it a better place to be for me. And when that's your focus, it's a better place for the people around you, isn't it?
It is definitely. Yep. You raise happier children, you have a better work environment.
Better relationships. Yeah. And it's not woo-woo. It's not, come follow me, I'll show you the way.
Well, I haven't heard that.
Say that again?
I said, I haven't heard that.
Yeah.
No Pied Piper.
Good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Ciao.